this is my first video that I'm going to dedicate to a channel that primarily talks about VCT content. I'm not going to have much of an intro here and just get right into the Pacific power rankings. I think I'll do power rankings for every other region. It just depends on whether I feel like it before they actually start. But Pacific, it's a long ways away, so I just thought that I'd get my thoughts out there. The first thing I have here is DFM, which I feel is pretty non-negotiable. DFM is a very mechanical team. Gen.G, GN, and Akame can all shoot their guns, which is nice, and obviously Mei is one of the best duelists just generally in Pacific. However, it's a very struggling team, majorly because of art and what I perceive to be his calling style, but perhaps even an issue with the other members and general coordination and awareness issues, I suppose. They look just generally lost half the time, and I hope that they can get a better leadership program, because without that, they're going essentially nowhere, and that's pretty much all I have to say about this team. The next team I have here on this list, which is a little bit more interesting, is ZETA Division. ZETA Division is interesting because a lot of their roster is young. Obviously, they brought up ZETA, XDLL, and CLZ from that Fennel roster, and while they got rid of ZETA in place for 1010, they still have a lot to prove, and by they I do mean XDLL and CLZ. CLZ seems to be a solid player who does good things and makes good decisions, while I'd say XDLL is more mechanical, but neither of them have done much to prove themselves. 1010 is a good young player with good mechanics. In their game against Talon, which was a bit of a Mickey Mouse because one of Talon's players, I think Jit Boys, was having some personal issues, but he looked really good, and I'm pretty sure that was 1010's debut game. Sugar Hero looks good as always, and I'd expect Depp to be solid too. Depp, of course, is at the top of his game, one of the greatest players just generally in Pacific, but I'm not sure how entirely comfortable he'd be on the Sentinel role. Overall, ZETA is just a lot of question marks, and I feel like something like DFM, they do have a lot to prove coming into this stage too. Another team that has a lot to prove, but I think might be able to go ahead and do it, is the next team, 10th place, Team Secret. What I think about Team Secret is strange and probably different from other people, because I feel like generally the opinion is that ZETA is just better than Team Secret right now. However, I do have a lot of faith in this Team Secret roster. Nizzy is a solid player. He's shown he could be comfortable in adversity because of his experience during Fancy United Esports when he was a standout player on that team in like 2023, playing those weird comps and stuff. I think Zespu and Kelly S., their other two pickups, are incredible, and especially Zespu, I think he could be a great sort of anchor that would, be hard-pressed to disappoint this team. He slammed Alter Ego under Boom, and he was a big part of Boom's incredible Ascension run in 24 that was only stopped by Sinprisa just looking absolutely unstoppable, I'd say. One sort of caveat for this team is that Wild Oreo hasn't really shown much in Tier 1. He was good back on Oasis, especially in his 22-23 run, but I'd say he needs to show a little bit more. And I don't really even have to mention Envy because he's one of the greatest of all time in Pacific, and I think he'll be just fine. The next team I have here is going to be Global Esports, which I feel is another team that you could either rate really highly or rate really lowly, depending on how you view the players. Udotan, I think, is a fun player to watch, but he does end up underperforming a lot, and I think if he continues to underperform the same way he has in some, not all of his matches, then Global will certainly struggle. Ban and Yeoman also have to prove themselves. They're big names, but I wouldn't say that their reputation lives up to their actual, quality as players. Crystal is good, but again, he's one of those inconsistent factors that can either really carry Global or really just drag them down a little bit. And I think one of the more consistent players, even though he struggled coming in from Naus in 2025, is Poppy. He's a great backbone who I think can hold down the team and make sure it isn't completely terrible with his, whole vibe that he brings to teams that he's on. Overall, Global, it's just a bit of a strange situation coming in with them. I think they'll be fine, but I wouldn't expect them to be particularly good. The next team is an aforementioned one, Nongshim Red Force, formerly Sunprisa Gaming. This team is a bit strange because I don't feel like there's any reason that they are as, I wouldn't say bad, but mediocre as they are. And I'd say there's just some sort of barrier that's preventing them from shooting up and hitting the top leagues. I mean, all of their players are individually great. Danby is, struggling a little, but people forget that he was one of their greatest, most hyped, and flashiest players back on the Sunprisa run. And I think, especially during now with the whole meta revolution going on, Teo being nerfed to the ground, he might be able to shine a lot more in that neon. Ivy is an incredible flex player and an even better deadlock. I would say he's one of the best deadlocks in the world. I think Francis has been great. He's a very consistent player. RB obviously coming in from Tech, and I think he is, again, one of those very great, very consistent players, especially in Korea on that Vision Strikers core. And I saved the best for last because Persia is truly one of the GOATs. I think he has great game sense, aim, and knowledge, and he's just a general, all-rounded player. I think they'd have to show more dominance for me to put them higher, though. Their roster individually looks incredible, but together as a team, they make some really silly mistakes, especially during their earlier Stage 1 games where I thought they just looked really lost at times. The next team that I have here is a team that I'd like to put higher because I think Thai Valorant players are really incredible, but I just frankly can't, is Talon Esports. I think Talon has, first of all, some individually incredible players. If you guys thought I meant that with Nongshim, I really mean that with Talon. Primi, I think, is just a monster, and he probably hasn't even shown his full potential yet. Cruz he does suck at shooting sometimes, but he is a pretty smart player, I'd say. Jitboy is great, but I'm really high on Killua, who is an unreal mechanical player, both in aim and general skills, and especially he fried when I watched him on Made in Thailand back in the day. I think THYY does need to step it up a little for me, and I don't entirely see much from him specifically, but as long as you have Premi performing really well, as long as Killua lives up to what I think he's capable of, and as long as the rest of the team does their job, you might see Talon shooting for the stars and reaching up there, because when they're at their peak, I mean, you guys remember this team was an incredibly strange but exciting team to follow back in the day when they were just debuting, and they've pretty much stayed like that sort of team with Frost's leadership style and with all the changes that they made. I think this is a team to watch out for, if nothing else. The next team I have here, I might regret putting 6th instead of 5th, but I do have T1. Now, T1, listen, they won Masters Bangkok, right? But they haven't been amazing at all of kickoff, all of Stage 1, or especially playoffs, where they looked terrible. They looked terrible at playoffs, especially Sylvan, who looked really lost sometimes, albeit every player on that team looked lost. Sylvan's replacement, DH, is not necessarily bad. I will say that. He was an incredible player on Team 1 Academy, and I think he has great discipline, although, he does tend to have his whiff moments. I will also say that the individual talent on this team is some of the best in all of Pacific. Meteor, Itzu, Stax, Buzz, I mean, they're just, you can't say anything besides from they are amazing players. However, if they want to actually break out and do good at champions, or even get to champions, they're going to have to fix pretty much all of their synergy issues. The next team I have here is going to be Boom. And while you could say that T1 have a lot more upside than Boom, and you could also have a lot more faith in T1 for that reason, I'd say that Boom's upsides are nothing really to scoff at. And I'd be a lot less concerned for Boom coming into Stage 2 than I would be for T1. First of all, Boom have some of the best prep in the entire of VCT, right? And I think a lot of people might forget that they looked absolutely unbeatable until the playoffs, where they shit the bed, much like T1. However, one thing that I think differentiates the two is that in playoffs, the Boom players didn't look like they forgot how to play Valorant. And you could even run it back to stage one and say, well, T1 didn't look nearly as dominant in stage one as Boom did. Going on to the players specifically, I'd say that Famousin is one of the greatest players just in Pacific. He has incredible performances in challengers, and I might glaze him a little bit unwarranted, but I think he might show up in stage two and do a lot of good stuff. The other players on this team, NC Slasher, he's an experienced player with good decision making skills. Shiro has great fundamentals. He drops some stinkers, but he also, can frag when he needs to. And DOS9, of course, is an absolute monster coming in from Revenant. Honestly, I think if you're going to put a question mark to this team and sort of doubt something regarding them, it's going to be Shiro's IGLing. Can it carry them not just to a lot of wins in region, but to an actual international event so Boom can stay as an Ascension team in the league? I'm not entirely sure. However, I do have a lot of faith in this team just because of the raw talent that is on it. And I wouldn't say that one player especially carries the rest of the team over the other. The next team I have here is RRQ. I think the whole LAN thing, I'm not even factoring that in specifically, although it is a factor because they didn't look great during LAN. What I'm more factoring in is just individual player quality versus the teams that are a little bit higher. First of all, I have Cushy and Jemkin, which I essentially have no concerns about. Jemkin did look a little rough at Toronto. However, he had a great Haven, and I think it isn't unrecoverable, while Cushy is just generally an incredible player with great clutch potential that's always been good like that. However, Zafiro, Monyet, and Crazy Guy, I do have a little bit of a concern about. Zafiro and Monyet are good and flexible, but they overheat a lot and they're pretty inconsistent, especially Zafiro. And Crazy Guy, it's a little bit rough because sometimes he doesn't shoot very well as having a little bit of an inconsistent IGLing style. I think they've fixed a lot of their issues. They used to be a team that played very, very slow and undisciplined, which doesn't usually go together, but RRQ was that team that was running a lot of those like very strange odd defaults that just made you roll your eyes. But they fixed that, especially in their grand finals in region. But they're gonna have to show that they could keep that up if they want to shoot up and go to champions and do something really great there. I mean, I think another point of this team is that they have the ability to be terrible all the time. They've played horrendously in their recent matches against Gen.G and Team Secret, and they had a scrappy game against PaperX. Of course, they did, terribly against Wolves, but I mean, they're not really like that one team that's super, consistently amazing. I'd just say that they're consistently good, and that alone isn't really enough to carry them, past the top four here on my list. What will carry you past top four is Hyunmin, and that's why DRX is my number three. I think for downsides on this team, there's not much, but the roles are sometimes finicky. I don't really like when Freeing doesn't play scan, and Estrella flexing can either look really good or really bad. I like Bayon on flashes, so, the whole flashback 7-man roster, it does make sense to me. However, it's a giant question mark whether it'll actually work or not when it comes to this team getting to champions and doing really good. I'll say for the upsides that they looked insane in their hero game versus PaperX. I don't know if anyone else watched that tournament, but it was looking really optimistic for that. Hyunmin, I already mentioned, but he is just the next big thing of Korean duelists. I mean, the guy pops off all the time. I think, I already said Bane. He's been a great addition whenever he stepped up to DRX, so I like that he's getting a lot more playing time here. And the one thing is that I'm still not fully convinced with Estrella's firepower specifically, but in terms of IGLing, I'd say he's always been that piece that is, a pretty consistently good IGL, so I think he fits DRX's system like that, and I don't really necessarily mind it. For number 2 here, it's pretty obvious. I have Gen.G, which of course gives PaperX the first spot. I don't necessarily think there's too many downsides for Gen.G, but of course you have to look at their strange tendency to get comebacked on the whole G2 game, and a lot of actually games before that are really strange. But even moving aside that, I also have some doubts about Ash, who doesn't look like he knows what he's doing as much as the other players on Gen.G, which isn't a problem when you compare him to the rest of the initiators. I think he's actually, a pretty good initiator in Pacific. It's just on Gen.G, is he going to be that piece of the puzzle that they really need to get to the top? Foxy9 is incredible, but he needs to show a little bit more consistency. And besides from that, I have no concerns. Munchkin, Charon, Texture, they're all looking nice, and I'm guessing that they'll, stay doing good in stage 2. It's just that Gen.G has a sort of momentum issue, and they need to find consistency as a team and stop throwing leads, I guess. That, of course, puts PaperX on top, which is very deserved because they played amazingly in this most recent tournament. The thing with PaperX is that they throw, right? But it doesn't really necessarily matter whether they throw or not, because if you throw and dominate in equal proportion, then at that point, you're essentially just dominating, if that makes sense. I'd say Jing would probably say that throwing and going crazy are just two sides of the same coin, and that sort of style is what won them this international and what got them so far in the past ones. Jing is on top of it mechanically, and Forsaken's just a beast at playing his agent effectively no matter who he's on. He's gotten especially good at that in this most recent final, where he looked like he just knew exactly what to do all the time. Devi struggled during the regular season a little bit, but he bounced back a ton during Toronto, and I think he proved how good he was. Patman, he is the added assistance that this team just needed. I wouldn't say he's significantly better than Mindfreak, but Patman, as a player, he's amazing at taking space and being disciplined and knowing when he needs to be aggressive and when he needs to just sit back and chill, which was experience that he gained from Tier 2, where he again looked amazing. The only thing, and I mean the only thing that you could say is a little bit of a question mark of this team, is something who at times looks great and at times looks not so great. But criticizing a team like PaperX, who just played some of the best Valorant I've seen this year, would be a pretty fruitless endeavor. And I think that they're going to do pretty good coming into stage 2 because, let's be honest, there's a pretty low chance, I'd say, of them repeating their fiasco at the beginning of stage 1. That's it for this video. I'm not expecting anyone to particularly find this, but if you do and you like it somehow, then just subscribe or like or do whatever to show support, because that would give me a little small dopamine hit, I think. And besides from that, I might do the other regions if I feel like it. So stay tuned for those, I suppose.